in Columbia. Well, it was a bit of a short day today here at the Statehouse, with the House having a little bit of a brief time in session today, and the Senate going a little bit longer, especially since some senators tried to bring up the controversial personhood bill. They tried to recall that bill from judiciary, which is a possible legislative maneuver some lawmakers try to use sometimes. However, they did not get the votes necessary to do that because that bill still has a lot of details that need to be worked out, as we saw last week in Senate Judiciary. But that's just some of the action we saw up here today. Another issue we saw was actually also in Senate Judiciary today, which is dealing with some nuclear utility regulation reform bills. Now, that committee did move out one of their bills, but they got bogged down on another one, which had to deal a little bit with more of the intricacies of the Public Service Commission and when some of those rates from SCNG can be put into place. There's a little bit of a time frame going on right now. I don't want to get too detail oriented, but we're going to jump right into it and also give you a little bit of a preview of what we're going to expect tomorrow. Hint, it has to do with plastic bags. We'll get right into it right now. Senate Majority Leader Shane Massey is pushing to keep VC summer-related bills moving on the Senate side now that the House has sent them several, including a major bill last week that would repeal part of the controversial Base Load Review Act that has SCNG ratepayers paying around $27 a month for the failed nuclear project. The Judiciary Committee took up two of their own bills today, moved one dealing with the candidate screening for the Public Utilities Review Committee, but is still debating another that would give utility regulators more time to review the failed project before allowing SCNG to continue charging customers for the abandoned reactors.
The Dominion SCANA merger proposal was filed under a provision in the Base Load Review Act that requires the Public Service Commission to rule within 6 months of the application being filed. If the Commission does not rule within 6 months, the Base Load Review Act says that application is granted. Right? Well, everybody knows how things work around here, and if you can just delay things for a few more weeks, there's not going to be enough time in the legislative session to do anything. So what we need to do is we need to delay that deadline at the Public Service Commission to give ourselves time to get the information we need in order to make a responsible decision, and then if we need to act, then we'll have time to do that. But right now, this track that we're on works in the favor of the utilities to get basically anything they want. And they know that, which is why they've been asking that people just slow down and take your time. That's a deliberate attempt to slow the process.
Right. I mean, I'm pretty well convinced that most of the requests we've had so far for everybody just to slow down and wait has been a deliberate attempt to run out the clock. All right. I think it makes sense for us to gather more information and to make the best decision that we can make on things. I think it's important that people be educated on these things. But if we're going to do that, we have got to take that gun away from the head, Senator, as you've described it, because that's exactly what it is. And if we don't do something to delay that deadline, you're going to get to the point. And honestly, I think even if you wait until next week, because what's going to happen is then we'll play with it in here, then we'll play with it on the floor, then it'll go over to the House and they'll play with it for a little bit, and it'll be a little bit different. Then we're going to have to go to a conference committee, and then it's going to be May before we've got something with all the other things that come up. If this thing gets stuck behind the budget or anything else that's significant, I think we run into problems. So this is not a substantive thing. I would not ask that we rush the interim rate bill through, right? I don't think that would be responsible. All I'm asking for is that we give ourselves time to consider things.
If we don't pass this, down the road we might have less options because we didn't protect ourselves. This bill hits the pause button. This bill hits the pause button, allows us to be deliberative and make those decisions. Without that, the folks that are trying to rush the decision are going to be able to take action because of our lack of action.
Later in the day in the Senate, Senator Shane Martin, a Republican from Pauline, attempted to bypass the committee process through a procedure by recalling the bill from the committee to the Senate floor. Now, debate kind of got a little heated. It was a little quick, but a lot of senators kind of sprang on this issue, especially those that were on the Senate Judiciary Committee who heard about this bill last week and where it also got bogged down over a variety of details. Even some pro-life conservatives had issues with this bill last week in committee and still did today. And on another note, too, we heard from Senate Judiciary Chairman Senator Luke Rankin, who is from Horry County, had some choice words for Senator Martin, who is trying to bypass his committee to bring that controversial bill right to the floor.
We had an hour and, I think, 30 minutes of discussion on this bill. And if you didn't like what happened at the end of that hour and 30 minutes of discussion on that bill, which was to carry over further consideration of that bill by a vote of 19-4, then you don't like the committee process perhaps, and you want to bypass that and you want to come straight to the floor. Or perhaps that's not your interest, that's not your goal, and it is simply to have another vote on something that clearly by the people who voted, and myself included in the 19, to give more work to an issue that if it hits this floor, we're told will stop the flow of the Senate's business.
Over in the House, the Judiciary Committee approved a bill that maintains the amount of liquor stores an entity can own in the state. So far that number is at 3, and there's a current law in place that maintains that through April, which is what has lit a fire under these lawmakers to pass this current bill through the committee process, get it on the House floor, and send it over to the Senate as quickly as possible. Let's get some more details on that from the committee.
In brief history-wise, we passed legislation that was very similar to this last session that limited liquor licenses to 3. And the issue that we're running into is on the legislation that we passed last year, which is H 3137. There's an expiration date on that of April 5 of this year. So that's why this legislation has been brought, and that's why we're attempting to address this issue as quickly as possible, because that provision and that law is set to expire April 5 of this year, 2018. What this bill does is puts an emphasis on the legislature's ability to police power and regulate alcohol sales and retail liquor sales in our state.
We seek to affirm the state's ability to regulate retail business liquor sales through our police powers. We explained that in the bill, and it just basically reinstates the law that has been the law for a very long time.
And on Wednesday, we expect some contentious House debate over H 3529. You may remember this bill from last year after lawmakers deadlocked over what to do with it. Now, this bill prohibits municipalities across the state from passing plastic bag bans. That's a little bit of a tongue twister. But some municipalities have already done this, especially ones along the coast, such as Isle of Palms, Folly Beach, Surfside Beach, and actually Hilton Head Island have passed these bans. So this bill would prohibit other municipalities from doing that. And like we said, it's still bogged down in the House, where we expect it to possibly pass tomorrow, get that key approval rating, that second reading as it's known, which will then eventually send it over to the Senate later this week. Now, the future over there will be a little bit harder to determine, especially since there's so many nuclear utility regulation reform bills still working their way through the Senate, and we're told that those bills are really going to take priority this year. But as we say, we'll see what happens in the Senate. You never really know until it gets over there. So stick with SCETV throughout the 2018 legislative session as we bring you daily video recaps every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, live at 7 p.m. on our Facebook page, our YouTube page, and my Twitter account at Gavin Jackson. Also, check out the Statehouse Daybook every day, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, on scetv.org to find out what's going on and where it's happening. I'm Gavin Jackson at the Statehouse in Columbia.